Alrighty, y'all, it's your boy Zuxis, and today we're doing the full breakdown definitive guide for Arcana. She is a rocket launcher support burst 2 character that does belong to the Elise Young Company and the bestseller squad. This character is not the craziest character in my opinion, just because like she works with only one character in the game, and unfortunately that one character was like the worst Pilgrim. I do think this character did save that character to an extent, nothing too major where it's like, oh my god, this character is now broken, but she did definitely make this character hit a lot harder than she was, especially for a 2022 release Pilgrim. I would say she actually saved this character in a sense of like, okay, this character is actually hitting decent damage now, right? But we're gonna break down her entire kit to kind of get you to understand if like what she does, and then I would say if you should summon for her or not. If you want my honest answer, the answer is no. You should not summon for this character on her banner. You can put her on the wish list if you want and try to get her like that, or just hopefully one day get her through your mode summons. But I don't think Arcana is a character you need to have, right? One, her best friend and her only friend is Isabel, right? The Pilgrim Isabel. If you do not have Isabel, this character is completely useless. Realistically, she does not work with anybody else that is not Isabel, right? That's just the truth, right? And when I say that, I mean as in her skill 1 and her skill 2, that 180% attack and attack damage buff you guys see, it does not work for anybody else, right? Besides Isabel. And I'm gonna break it down. So if you take a look at her skill 1, right, Awaken Destiny, it says activates when the full burst ends and affects all burst 3 electro code allies who previously casted their burst skill if self is in the Wheel of Fortune status. Now my thing is, basically what that means is that she needs to be in the Wheel of Fortune status, but the full burst needs to end as well. Now on average, a full burst takes 10 seconds, right? On average, a full burst of your battle, like in any battle, will take 10 seconds unless you have a character that increases the full burst time by 5 seconds, or a character that decreases the full burst time by 5 seconds. And in this character's case, you want to use her with a character that decreases the full burst time by 5 seconds. And obviously because of that affects all burst 3 electrical allies, that kind of limits who you can use, because now you're forced to use a burst 3 character who is an electric code ally that has a cooldown of 5 seconds on that, or who lowers the full burst time by 5 seconds. Now the only character in the game that can do that, that meets all those requirements, is Isabel, right? If you do not know who Isabel is, I'm just gonna quickly show you guys who that is. If you're a new player or some shit, I don't know. Isabel is this character. This is the only character in the game that can do that. If you take a look at the very last thing of her burst skill, affects all allies full burst time decreased by 5 seconds, right? You guys see right here, she's a burst 3. You guys see right here, she's an electric character. She is the only one that can do that, right? So like realistically what they're basically saying is use her with Isabel, because there's nobody else in the game that has that in terms of burst 3 electric code characters, right? Vesti has it, but she's a water DPS. She's not an electric DPS. So that's a big thing to know. When it comes to burst 3 electric code allies, only Isabel can do that, right? But basically what you get for that is the cooldown of the skill 2 is decreased by 75% for 15 seconds, which is great because Isabel's skill 2 is like it's basically damage dealt, right? She deals damage to 5 random enemies, and having that decreased by 75% for 15 seconds is quite crazy, especially since that cooldown is like 15 seconds. The skill 2 is 15 seconds, so it's like basically she reduces Isabel's skill 2 by a big amount, and then she also gives them an attack damage buff of 180% for 15 seconds. The thing is, Isabel is never going to be able to use her burst skill and have that 180% attack damage buff, just because obviously Isabel is still a 40-second cooldown character, right? She is still a 40-second cooldown character. So what basically how this is going to work is she's only ever going to get this 180% attack damage buff after a full burst. Not during a full burst, not before a full burst, after a full burst. Meaning after you use her burst skill, then she'll get this buff. So this 180% attack damage buff is only going towards Isabel's normal attacks, which isn't too bad because like I said, her skill 2 is, damage dealt, but damage dealt to 5 enemies, but it doesn't really change the fact that it is not going to her burst skill. I think if that 180%, especially since they limited it just to Isabel, if that 180% went to her burst skill as well, then she would be a lot better in my opinion, right? And then it says activates when full burst ends, affects all allies. She just gives an attack buff of 5% of the caster's attack. So basically 5% of whatever her attack stat is, her base attack stat is, she will give that to all allies for 10 seconds after the full burst ends. Great. If you take a look at her skill 2, Cycle of Destiny, it's the same exact thing as skill 1, but all you get this time is an attack buff, not an attack damage buff, but an attack buff of 180%. And again, it has to be of the caster's based attack for 15 seconds, right? So the exact same requirement. She has to basically still be in the Wheel of Fortune status, but have the full burst end. So only Isabel again, and then she'll give Isabella 180% attack buff, right? That is of her base attack. So great. And then if you take a look at the second part of her skill 2, it says activates when full burst ends, affects all allies if self is in the Wheel of Fortune status. Death. She will give all allies cooldown reduction for their burst skill by 6 seconds, right? So if you don't have Isabel on your team again, right, then she doesn't have cooldown reduction. You know what I mean? This part for this second line right here where it says activates when full burst ends, affects all allies if self is in the Wheel of Fortune status. You can then use her with Vesti just for CDR, and then that 50% attack buff she's giving for 5 seconds. You can use Vesti because it, no matter what, like, when it comes to that part of her skill 2, the coding of the character does not matter whatsoever. The electric type does not matter. The water type doesn't matter. None of that matters. As long as she's in the Wheel of Fortune and the full burst ends, that's all that matters. So for that skill 2, yes, Vesti would work there. But then it's like you're essentially using Vesti with this character just for cooldown reduction. And it's like there's a lot of better characters you can use for that does not require you to use Vesti, right? And then also here, when the full burst ends, affects all allies again. She gives an attack damage buff of 7.5% for 10 seconds. Quite a self-explanatory. Like the mediocre buffs that she's giving to all allies without any requirements are like, I mean, it's nice, but it's nothing too crazy, right? Like 5% of the caster's attack on skill 1, and then 7.5 of an attack damage buff, like for free when the full burst ends. It's nothing too crazy, but it is free, I guess, right? And then her burst skill, which is on a 40-second cooldown, says this only goes to electric-code allies. Not everybody on the team, only electric-code allies. Wheel of Fortune attack damage buff is increased by 10% for 10 seconds, right? So that's self-explanatory. Only people who are electrical will get an attack damage buff of 10% for 10 seconds. And then she herself will deal 300% of final attack as burst skill damage, and then give damage taken increase to all enemies for 10 seconds, which is quite crazy because if we go back to Isabel's skill 1, or the first ability of Isabel's burst skill is that she gives damage taken increase by 31% to all enemies. So it's kind of stacking there, right? But Arcana's whole entire thing is that you want to be using her with Isabel. It's self-explanatory realistically. It's not really, like, you would have to actually like think about that unless you read the patch notes or something where it kind of just tells you want to use her with people who, you know, reduce the full burst time. But other than that, like, you're not going to get use out of this character if you do not have Isabel, right? And because I've already done so many showcases for Arcana, or I haven't, but because like it's only her and Isabel, I'm not going to do showcases for her within this video, just throughout like other videos you guys see. Because if you guys know, when I do these full breakdown videos, I usually do multiple team videos for them, or multiple team battles in that video for them. Arcana, I'm not going to do it for her just because she's not worth doing it for, especially since she's not that crazy if you're not with Isabel. She is a supporter, so you don't need to give her overload gear, but if you do decide to give her overload gear, realistically you can give her charge speed, charge damage, and attack percent, or elemental damage, right? She is still going to do DPS to some damage to an extent, so you can go ahead and give her freaking elemental damage. It's really up to you. I would not give this character overload gear, but if you wanted to, elemental damage, attack percent, and those, it's specifically for her birth skill, and then the last roll can be whatever the hell you want. And then for her cube, probably just your best cube. Shouldn't really think too hard about that. It doesn't matter. Just give her your best cube. And then for her team, it's really just her and Isabel, and then you gotta work around that, right? So it is what it is. But other than that, Arcana, full breakdown, definitive guide, I guess, to an extent. Let me know what you guys think. It's your boy Xioxus. I'm out. Peace.